Our next session deals with conduction system pacing. The chairpersons of this session include Dr. Munna Dash, Dr. B.N. Jha, Dr. Aftab Khan, Dr. Shahidul Islam, and Dr. Robin Chakraborty. Moderating this session will be Dr. Sanjeev Mukherjee and Dr. Devabroto Beda. Expert panelists of this session include Dr. Vineet Kumar, Dr. Sandipta Ray, and Dr. Ashraful Haq. May I please request the respected chairpersons and moderator to start the proceedings.
Munna is here there.
Sir, Dr. Vinita Arora ma'am haven't joined now, so we can start with Dilip Kumar sir, I guess.
Okay, sure. Okay, so I think conduction system pacing, as we all know, is definitely a modality of therapy that we all need to know and need to track it as much as new things are coming. So I would now welcome Dr. Dilip Kumar to talk on the techniques of conduction system pacing. So Dilip is an interventional cardiologist at Medica Super Specialty Hospital, Kolkata. Yeah, Dr. Dilip, go ahead, please.
Yeah, at the outset, let me thank all the national, international faculty and delegates and for joining this ICON 2021. So I'll be speaking on left bundle area pacing techniques. So we have been doing pacemakers, right ventricular apical pacing for maybe 70 years. And we have seen the problem of atrial fibrillation, cardiac dysfunction, heart failure in these patients. And this is not a minuscule problem. There is a 1% increase in the risk of AF for each 1% increase in cumulative right ventricular pacing. So we are dealing with a substantial problem. And the most trial showed us that if the percentage of pacing becomes more than 40%, there is a significant difference in the outcome of the patient in terms of clinical, how the patient is event-free survival, lateral fibrillation incidence, hospitalization for heart failure. And landmark trial that was block heart failure trial showed that less than 50% ejection fraction patients, the CRT is much better than right ventricular pacing. So that's why there is a lot of buzz around conduction system pacing, and there has been very increased uptake of conduction system pacing in last 2 to 3 years. And we can appreciate the targets here, the His bundle and the lower left bundle area pacing. The concept of longitudinal dissociation of fibers are known to us for a long time, and it's not like at the bifurcation, the right bundle or left bundle is getting, arising. The fibers which are destined for left bundle or right bundle, they come up very early in the His bundle. And that is why we can recruit left bundle or right bundle when we pace even His. So these are the toolkits. This is a C315 sheath, which is a non-deflectable sheath, which is commonly used, and this is only available. This is the only sheath available in India for conduction system pacing. 305 is a deflectable sheath, and the experts who have access to both the sheets, they still feel that the fixed one is easy to handle, and the lead is 1.4 millimeter lumenless lead, and it has a 9 millimeter tip to ring spacing. That is very important, and because we can make out how much deep we have gone in towards septum on seeing the fluoro. So the implant technique is not much of difference. We take 2 axes, and then we can take C315 sheath directly over the wire, or we can take a vascular sheath of 7 French, and then through that we can take the sheath over the long wire. And once we go in, if we are going for a His bundle pacing, we map the His, and we look for the signals where the ventricular signals are at least more than twice of atrial signals. So we need to see the A, H, and V, and V should be more than twice of A. So the first 2 positions are not good, and the third is the reasonable position where we can go for His pacing. But His pacing has its own limitations, like there is a lot of dislodgements, instability. There's the atrial oversensing, atrial pacing, and the R waves are not proper, it is always less than 2. So these problems are there. That's why His bundle is being replaced practically by many labs. And let's go to lab and see how left bundle pacing is done. Sheet, Medtronic, and This is the dilator. You can appreciate there are two curves. One is the proximal curve, which takes the catheter towards tricuspid valve. And the second curve here is made so that it go and hit the septum. So these are the purpose of two bends. One is the proximal bend and the second is the terminal bend. Proximal bend ensures it goes into near tricuspid valve, and the terminal bend it averts the septum. This is the 3830 lead. This is a 4 French lead and doesn't have any lumen, so a stylusless lead, and it has got a helix at the end. So the entire lead goes inside once we start screwing it. So once we once we take the sheath down, we can, like initially we can mark the His with catheters from groin, the femoral vein, quadripolar catheter, and we can map the His, and this will be an anatomical location where we need to go in. So if we can draw a line, imaginary line from the His to the apex, and 1 to 2 centimeter down in RAO, you get this position of left bundle area. First, we go inside in the RAO projection, and there is you all are aware where is the normal. And then we go to LAO, and we see that this is perpendicular, and we see the signals. We need to see the W pattern in the V1 and the ABR, AVL discordant at least in the early part, and then we screw and go deep in the septum. It is important that when any assistant is holding the sheath at a particular place where you have fixed in, and then you use your 2 hands to screw in. The RSRS RLB-like pattern, and what we'll do is now we'll pace VCLVAT and we'll pace. So start pacing. Pacing at 8 volts. Come down on voltage. How much voltage? 8 volts. Come down. 7 volt. 6.5. I can appreciate 6. Come down, come down. So you can appreciate the RSRS 2.5, 1.5. So these are the like deflections we tend to see in V1. You can appreciate the W and which changes to RSRS. And we'll look at the LVAT at 8 volt and 1 volt, and we'll see the difference happening. Measure the LVAT at 1 volt. This is 1 volt. Flip, increase the flip, yeah. V5. Measure it to V5. From stimulus, to peak of the arc. It is something 78. Okay. So now you pace at 8 volt. So 8 volt. Now you measure. Again, do the same thing. And from stim to peak of the R in V5, this is exactly little back. It is 78, near to 78, 80. Yeah, you see, appreciate exactly same. So these are the evidence. You can see changing from W to go and show the W pattern. When we started pacing, you can appreciate the W pattern. This is where we started. You can appreciate the notch, and then now you show the line. You can appreciate the difference. So this is how these are the evidences. Like you can appreciate the. So we see basically how the transition has happened, and we see the LVAT. If it is less than 80, it means you are pacing left bundle, and the activation to the lateral valve is early. And then we fix the lead there and remove the sheath by slitting. So this is how we do the slitting. And then the atrial lead is positioned, and we see that there is a recruitment of left bundle branch block, and this patient is still doing well. I will show you, quickly 2-3 cases where it has, unlike the common indications, these LBB area pacing has worked. This patient was having a right bundle branch block with AF with 30% ejection fraction, normal coronaries, And we can appreciate a wide QRS with right bundle branch and atrial fibrillation. Patient was severely symptomatic and he was having recurrent hospitalization. This was the echo of the patient. So we did AV junction ablation and left bundle optimized pacing. So you can appreciate a right ventricle apex lead, left bundle lead, and a lead in the lateral wall of the LV. And this was the ECG which we got. Is a fairly narrow QRS, and this patient ejection fraction has come up, and he is now in stage 2-3 NYHA. So he's doing perfectly fine. This gentleman, we tried CRT, and it was one of the unlucky patients where we couldn't do. We saw dissection there, and then finally we rescued the patient with the left bundle pacing, and this was the ECG which we got, which was highly satisfied with the left bundle. So this worked just like CRT in this case. This was 68-year-old lady, left bundle branch block with intermittent CHB, ejection fraction of 45%. We also wanted to do a left bundle pacing here, considering the low ejection fraction. This was the baseline ECG of the patient. We could manage to get ECG something like this. And this patient I'm showing because this patient had a severe scoliosis of spine, and here also we could do it without much of difficulty. So there was, but the only thing which was guiding was electrical signals. Anatomy was totally haywire. We published this as well. So in nutshell, what we look at the future of pacing is we can try for his bundle pacing. If we don't get a proper place, we don't get a proper threshold, we feel that is not going to work, we move for left bundle branch pacing. And if left bundle branch pacing is not, we feel that it is not going to work, it's not, it's failing, or you are unable to do left bundle branch pacing, then we can go for a biventricular pacing when the patient's ejection fraction is less than 50%. And if the patient has a normal LV with ejection fraction more than 50%, we can go for right ventricular pacing. Thank you so much for the patient hearing, and we can have discussion in the end.
I think we go to the next speaker. Dilip.
Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Vanita is available now.
Thank you, Dr. Dilip. Hi.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
If Dr. Vanita is not there,
In the end, we'll have a discussion session.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's go to Shanmugas. I think
Our next, Sunanda, I'll call our next speaker regarding the complication, Dr. Shunmuga Sundaram.
Yeah.
I hope he is available. Yeah.
Yes, sir, I'm available. Yeah. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, yes. Dr. Sundaram,
Yes,
yeah, regarding the complication, it is the most important part in the conduction tissue pacing, because particularly for the fear of that, most of this as we are not practicing. So I hope you will this particularly highlight regarding the complication of this, all the issues.
Thank you, sir. I would like to thank the organizing committee for giving me this opportunity. Like sir mentioned, this is in fact the most important topic of the session, because we need to know and understand the complications and how to tackle the complications. Then we will be able to do it fearlessly, especially with an innovative technique like this, where we don't have a long-term data. Of course, Dilip sir had beautifully shown how to do the procedure. So in his bundle pacing, we'll be placing the lead. This 3830 4.1 front size lead is the most commonly used lead. So you have to scan all along the his bundle to look for the disease-free zone, and then you have to put the lead in the disease-free distal his bundle. In left bundle branch pacing, you'll be placing the lead in the proximal left bundle by starting from the right side of the septum, drilling the septum to reach the left ventricular subendocardium. So this is very important to understand the fluoroscopic anatomy of the conduction system. So it's our practice to keep a quadripolar catheter in the his bundle zone and mark the distal extent of the his, and one catheter in the right ventricular apex. So this is how the conduction system will look like in RAO view. So your distal end of the his bundle catheter will localize the bifurcation zone of the his bundle. The his bundle bifurcates into left bundle and right bundle. So fluoroscopically, in an RAO view, both his right bundle and left bundle are not mutually related. So there is some spatial separation between left bundle and right bundle in RAO view. So there are a few important things which we have to understand. So in his bundle pacing, we'll be placing the lead here. and in left bundle pacing, we'll be targeting the 1.5 centimeter along an imaginary line connecting the distal ace bundle to the RV apex. You can see the imaginary line, so we'll be targeting here. So this is the area where you'll be able to approach the left bundle. So you have to avoid two important areas here. So one is this zone where you may find a coronary artery here. So you try to avoid screwing the lead, whether you're doing a ace bundle pacing or a left bundle pacing. Try to avoid the area just immediately beneath the ace bundle zone, and try to avoid an area at an angle of 0 degree along the ace bundle catheter. So like here you have placed the quadripolar catheter here. So if you are going to map for any signal and at a 0 degree angle, you may injure the right bundle and you'll end up in complete heart block if the patient's native rhythm is a left bundle branch block. Ace bundle pacing, like sir was telling, a lot of issues are there with ace bundle, though it produces beautiful results. And in fact, this is considered as the most physiological form of pacing. So we know that there is a chronic rise in threshold during follow-up with ace bundle pacing. And there is a chance of distal progression of the conduction system disease. And they can have an atrial oversensing, ventricular undersensing, and many times the lead may just capture the atrium instead of the ace bundle. And there are a lot of incidents of lead dislodgements during follow-up. And since the threshold is very high, we may program the battery at a high output, which put the patient at risk of premature battery depletion. Of course, high threshold. So while doing the procedure, if you find that the threshold is very high, then there is a high chance that during follow-up, the patient can end up in having a high threshold. So don't accept a threshold of more than 2.5 volt at 1 milliseconds pulse width. But with the advent of left bundle, off late for the last 1 to 1.5 years, will not accept any threshold of more than 1.5 volt at 0.5 milliseconds pulse width. So that should be our threshold to accept the ace bundle result or not. Exception being an ace bundle current of injury. So if you feel that there is a significant current of injury, which will be able to see it from the EP system or from the program system analyzer, initially there may be a rise in thresholds, after which with the settlement of the current of injury, you may see that the threshold might coming up. There are important warning signs during implantation which you have to look for, which will predict that there is a chance of dislodgements or rise in threshold in the future. So these includes a large difference between unipolar and bipolar threshold. So on table, you have to measure both unipolar and bipolar threshold. If both are having a significant difference between these values, you should not accept that zone. You have to unscrew it and put it at some other area. And if there is any positional change, right, with the inspiration, expiration, if there is a significant change in the loop, then you have to probably put a better loop to avoid a late lead dislodgement. A very low incidence cannot be accepted. Similarly, you have to pace at a higher rate to look for a distal block. Suppose pacing at a higher rate, if you are not able to get a 1:1 conduction, that means that there is a significant distal to the conduction, distal to the site of implantation. So in near future, one, there may be a rise in threshold. Second, you may not be able to conduct the ventricle in a 1:1 fashion. Of course, atrial oversensing and ventricular undersensing, that can be tackled by adjusting the parameters, the programmed parameters, provided the threshold is good. Of course, there is a significant learning curve for ace bundle pacing, unlike left bundle branch pacing. So if you see the initial quartile, if you are going to divide your 100 cases into 4 quartiles, the initial quartile definitely will have an increased incidence of complications, including a rise in threshold during follow-up, lead revisions, lead dislodgements. All these things can happen during the initial 10 to 20 cases. So once you're comfortable with the cases, as time goes on, you'll be able to learn in a better way. And probably once you cross 30 or 40 odd cases, then probably your results will be very good with a less incidence of rising thresholds and less incidence of lead revisions. Of course, this was the recently published data by Virginia group, Dr. Ellen Brogan's group from Virginia University, where they have shown that success rate is really good with ace bundle pacing. With the currently available tools, close to 93% they could successfully implant a lead. Though the sensing remains stable at follow-up, you can see a significant rise in threshold from 1.1 to 1.7 volt during a mean follow-up of 2 years. The numbers included in the study include 295. This is a good number to be included in a ace bundle study for a follow-up. And another important thing which you have to see is almost 1/4 of the patient had a rise in threshold of more than 2.5 volts. So this is really a matter of concern, because a capture threshold of more than 2.5, programming the battery at a more than 4 or 5 volt, this is going to put the patient at risk of premature battery depletion. And the 17% had a loss of ace bundle capture. So though the ace bundle capture was lost, there was some septal pacing, so that there was no episodes of Brady-related events in these patients. But 11 patients required lead revision, due to unacceptable thresholds and because of lead dislodgements. So how to manage? Obviously, if you find that the his bundle leads got dislodged, then you have to go for an alternative site. So with the availability of left bundle now, so we always go down to left bundle to capture the left bundle. And if it is done for a CRT indication, obviously you have to go for either left bundle or go for a conventional bi-way device. Suppose if it's a case of a simple complete heart block with a normal LV function, obviously you have to choose between an RV apical pacing and a left bundle pacing. So this particular patient whom we have implanted his bundle pacing in 2019, the threshold was really good at the time of implantation. But over a period of 1 year, he had a rise in threshold, and he came to us in the last September with a capture threshold of 7 volt. You can see in the ECG there was a non-selective capture with a significant delta wave. After the pacing spike, this indicates that there is a non-selective capture, and he had multiple episodes of pre-syncope also, probably because of intermittent loss of capture. So we had to take up the patient. So we actually implanted a new lead in the left bundle zone, and we extracted that old his bundle lead, and this left bundle lead produced beautiful result with a QRS duration of 92 milliseconds. So these are the important things which you have to remember or which you have to keep in mind while performing his bundle pacing. Left bundle pacing, the technique was described by Dilip sir just couple of talk back. There are 2 ways of putting the lead. One is a conventional lead technique, which was described. But of late, we started doing this another way of lead implantation, which is known as a PVC guided lead deployment, where it will be giving rapid rotations and it will be monitor the PVCs generated by the lead movement, and we'll stop giving rotations once we see a PVC with an RBWB morphology with a narrow QRS duration. This we label that PVC as a template beat. So of late we start doing the procedure with that PVC guided approach rather than the conventional approach. So this was again described by Dilip sir. So where you have to target the 1.5 centimeter zone below the his bundle along an imaginary line connecting distal his bundle to RV apex. The QRS W pattern lead V1 will gradually, the notch on the W pattern W will gradually go up to form an R wave. Of course, this was the most discussed topic in 2019 when we started discussing about left bundle. The myocyte injury due to deep septal deployment of the lead. The lead is going to bore the myocardium in the septum, and it is going to get placed at the deep septal location. So that is going to produce some sort of myocyte injury. So this was extensively discussed in 2019. So we took it as a project. We analyzed the troponin values of those patients who are undergoing his bundle, left bundle, and conventional electrophysiological interventional procedures. So what we found out was his bundle released less amount of troponin. As we can see, only 17% of his bundle group had a troponin positivity, and left bundle almost 49% of the patient had an elevation of troponin, a significant elevation of troponin, but this was still less than the SVT group. The SVT group includes those conventional AVNRTs and WPOW ablation, where you can see almost 69% of the patients had an elevation of a troponin. So this means that though left bundle produced some sort of myocyte injury, the extent of injury is still less than your conventional RF ablation for a simple SVT. So this again confirms the safety of the procedure. So we had a case where we actually injured the artery. So then only we stopped placing the lead closer to the his bundle. In fact, in this particular patient, the lead was placed just below the his bundle zone. So we probably injured a septal artery that had produced intense vasospasm to produce ST elevation in anterolateral leads. Or the other theory might be some air might have embolized into the diagonal. So whatever, the patient developed on-table ST elevation transiently. Luckily, the ST elevation settled within 5 minutes. We could complete the procedure. Actually, it was done for a DCM LVBB. We did a check angio after the procedure. We didn't find anything. So we thought it may be either an intense vasospasm due to septal artery injury, or it may be an air embolism to the diagonal artery. So there was another case report from US by Dr. Parikshit, where they had a dislodgement of lead into the left ventricular cavity. This is also important while following the patient in the device clinic. Always look for a pacing threshold. So if there is any change in pacing threshold, any change in pacing impedance, like if the impedance is falling below 400 ohms, you have to be very careful. So whether the lead has fallen into the left ventricle, you have to assess this very carefully with the echocardiography and fluoroscopy. So another important thing is change in QRS morphology. Pace QRS morphology sometimes may get little wider once you enter into the left bundle. And in this particular patient, in fact, the lead was facing the papillary muscle. So the paced QRS morphology was almost similar to a papillary muscle VT. So these are the things which you have to follow up in device cleaning. So now recently we have started using the conventional 6-French lead using a specialized sheet from other companies for doing a left bundle branch pacing. So there are 2 important things which you have to keep in mind while using a conventional lead. So one thing is the lead being a bulky lead, it's a 6-French lead. So it's going to drill a big hole in the myocardial septum. So the big lead hanging across the tricuspid leaflet, the chance of displacement will be little more as compared to a tiny lead, which is going to have a less displacement. So the lead dislodgements and a big hole in the septum. And the second important thing is reattempts. For example, in a given patient, if you are not satisfied with the first position, you may be unscrewing it and deploying it at some other site. We actually have attempted at least 8 to 10 times in a patient if you are not happy with the one position. But with the bulky leads, we may be little hesitant, or we may not do multiple attempts with a bulky lead to capture the left bundle. So these are two important things. In fact, they have reported a couple of cases where they have attempted repositioning the lead after an initial positioning, and ultimately there was a lead fracture and the tip got fractured, and it actually remained in the ventricular myocardial septum, and the other part of the lead came out into the ocean. So this you have to keep in mind while using the conventional lead. Lately,
Your time is up, sir. Please.
I'll just finish. So lately dislodgement is very rare. So we had a case where the lead got dislodged after 2 years. So we had to expand the lead and put the lead in again, we used a new lead and placed it in a left bundle area. So these things which you have to keep in mind while doing left bundle branch pacing. In fact, our experience with the conduction system pacing closely have done around 291 cases, which is predominantly of left bundle. So among the his bundle, we had at least a 10% lead dislodgement, 2 occurred subacutely and 1 occurred late, and 3 patients had late rising thresholds. As compared to his bundle, left bundle had relatively stable lead parameters. The lead dislodgement, 3 patients, close to 1.5% of the patient had a lead dislodgement. 1 occurred on acute basis, 1 occurred on a subacute basis, and 1 occurred after 2 years. So overall, when you see the safety profile of the procedure, left bundle branch is a little safe as compared to his bundle pacing in terms of lead stability and rising threshold. But remember, the left bundle is a relatively new procedure. The first procedure was done in the year of 2017 by Dr. Huang. So we don't have a long-term data to confirm the safety of the procedure. So there are limitations with both left bundle as well as his bundle. So these things has to be kept in mind before adapting it as a workhorse strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sundaram. Very nicely elaborated in details, lot of complications and yet. Our next speaker is Dr. P.K. Hajra sir, and regarding the leadless pacemaker, Dr. Hajra is one of the best top cardiologist of city, and he has a keen interest in always following him very closely. And in regarding as I remember, the Dr. Hajra is a pioneer of leadless pacemaker in Kolkata city. So Dr. Hajra, please kindly elaborate and on particularly leadless topic very relevantly, and future it will be one of the techniques.
Right. Thank you very much, friends. We have many concepts of leadless pacemaker, and Micra is one of them. You can put leadless pacemaker outside the heart, inside the ventricle, left and right. Even the future maybe inside the atria with a sensor, and there will be crosstalks between these pacemakers. Now, this Y system is purely wireless CRT system, and this leadless AICD, I have an experience of putting the first MRI SICD in India, but this is very costly. I have experienced only 3 patients, and these are very good, and especially in young, there is no lead inside. There's no need for lead extraction in case of endocarditis or lead fracture. So it is a promising thing for the future. Medtronic Micra, it is a double chamber like wireless pacemaker. It is 1.75 gram. This has been recently introduced in the Indian market, and this is, since it is a conduction system pacing, and this is the first time in Eastern India is a Biotronic lead. It's just ordinary Biotronic pacing lead for left bundle branch pacing, LVB pacing, and on the top of that, he's got an ICD, and these patients can do better on this left bundle branch block pacing with the Biotronic or Medtronic pacemakers. So VDD, ICD, again, you have atrial leadless CRT. You have this kind of lead available from Biotronic. You don't need any atrial lead, and you can use the VDD ICD lead. So atrial leadless CRT is possible with a new technique. We had a NanoStim in the past, but because of perforation, we have forgotten. These small things can interact in the future. Now we have this atrial sensing algorithm in micro AV. We have S1, S2, S3 in the heart. This phonographic sensing of the micro pacemaker, which was a single chamber pacemaker in the past. They actually sense the A4 segments of atrial contractions. And once they get the atrial contraction, they can stimulate the ventricle up to 30 milliseconds. Now, once you have a kind of atrial slapping due to old lead, you have to remove those leads. And this is a real-time patients. When you see that on standing, on coughing, on Valsalva, this AV synchrony is maintained. And this is the first micro AV pacemaker in India, and patient is doing well. Now on echocardiography, you can have this kind of cartoon, and it does sense most of the 97% of the AV synchrony is possible in this newer pacemaker. You do from femoral route, but sometimes in children we can go from a jugular. I have only one case in the world, a second case in the world, which has been transplanted, which has been implanted through the opening of common iliac vein in a patient who has got repeated infections. Now, this is the first time, this is the first AV micra upgraded from single chamber micra because of LV dysfunction. It's very difficult to make out which one is double chamber, which one is single chamber, but this micra is a little bit longer than the previous single chamber micra. Now, this is done basically through the same catheter, same technique, same insertion, same anchoring. You must check on RAO and LAO. Usually the big septum and lower septum is a preferred one because you do not produce, if you produce perforation, there will be no pericardial effusions. So this is a man who had a repeated infections. The lead were extracted, temporary pacemaker. On the same day, he had implantation of double chamber micro pacemaker, and I made him walk immediately from the table. And this is the plaster on his chest from the previous pacemaker infected, removed, and he's able to walk. And with the walk, then he asked them to sit down in standing posture or in sitting posture. You can check that AV synchrony. The AV synchrony is not maintained in the atrial A4 signal is less than 0.2. You can increase or decrease the sensing power. Now do the femoral vein, you go to the heart, dilate the microdilator is the best dilator of the femoral vein. You can keep this sheath for extraction of dislodged device in the right side like ASD or any device you embolize on the right side or right ventricle is very good device, and it is 27 French. So once you enter into the RV, you take one injection with multi-purpose 5 French, RAO and LAO. You can use a temporary pacemaker for piggybacking this pacemaker, but it's very nice sheath. You can drop from the superior vena cava into the RV. So you use this amplifier super steep wear. Once you have this steep wear, you enter the RV. So you remember this micra is a fall from above rather than push from below. So always try to pull it down from the SBC. It's once you enter, inject it. And once you inject, you can produce this kind of bowing. Once you produce this kind of bowing, you can always release without any hesitations. And if you're not happy with the POA, or if you're not happy with the threshold or the impedance, you can always recapture. But remember, when you're recapturing, then this cup should come towards the pin. And once you have that, your R wave or a threshold, usually 90%, I have an experience over 100 micra in our country, and most of the time, 95%, the threshold is less than 0.3. If you have any threshold which is more than 1, you should not accept it, because if you have more threshold, the little micra will not last long. And it lasts for 11.8 years. So ideally, it should be perpendicular to the septum. And you can leave, and you can see the hooks on Zoom. And if you see those hooks are moving like a flying bird, you can always release. But this micra is so good. I have never seen any perforation, any death, any embolization so far. With that, I would like to thank for your kind attention. Over to you. Thank you.
Dr. Jha, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, in future, it will be one of the top technology, and gradually a lot of changes in even leadless pacemaker is happening. Gradually, a lot of new manufacturers are coming. Hope this will be the elaborative technique in future. Thank you, sir. I'd like to invite our next speaker regarding topic is TYRX by Dr. Anil Saxena. Anil Saxena, sir, start your talk.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I must begin by thanking the organizers for inviting me to this presentation. My topic is on relatively new technology, that is antibiotic envelope, which can be used in patients where we implant the CID devices. Now we know that CID infections are a very dreaded complication of pacemaker, ICD, and CRT implants, and which can happen in about 1 to 4% of patients. And we know that these patients, they have a very troublesome course, because once the infection occurs in a device, most often we have to remove the device. And these patients, they sometimes have to undergo lead extraction, and the mortality at 1 year can be quite high, up to 3 times the normal. And what's happening over last 1 or 2 decades is that the number of implants is not rising as much, but the number of infections are rising at twice the speed. And this is because the patient mix has changed. There are more older patients, more patients with comorbidities, longer procedure times because of a lot of upgrades. And there is a mix of device change also, in the sense that a lot more CRTs and CRTDs are being implanted, which have a long procedure time. A lot of patients are undergoing revisions and upgrades from pacemaker to CRT, CRTDs, etc. So that is probably responsible for increased infection rate. And typically what we do is we try to prevent infection by preoperative preparations, very good skin preparation during the surgery. And then subsequently we give intravenous antibiotic, and followed by, some people give oral antibiotic for 5 to 7 days. But despite that, there is a significant problem of infections and erosions. And this is also increased because of the fact that a lot of new centers are being added every year, and people in the initial learning period, they obviously have a higher infection rate and higher erosion rates that has been confirmed in several studies. And this is also a fact that whenever infection occurs, it's quite a disaster for the patient, especially in case of replacement, because the leads are chronic, and it is very difficult to, once the infection occurs, it is very difficult to remove those leads. And these patients, they have a much higher mortality compared to those who do not get infection. So infection as such is quite a problem in device patients. There are some predisposing factors. Frequently seen factors are diabetes mellitus, CKD, pulmonary disease, obesity, heart failure, and of course malignancies. All these are risk factors for development of infection. And some patients who are immunocompromised, or have some blood dyscrasias, they are also very vulnerable to infection. So this is one additional thing that one can have in their practice, and it's an antibiotic antimicrobial envelope, which is absorbable and which can be used at the time of implantation. It is made from absorbable multifilament mesh, which is impregnated with antibiotics, so it can deliver local adjunctive antibacterial protection. And it also being a synthetic mesh like thing, it promotes device stabilization as well in the pocket. The envelope contains 2 antibiotics, minocycline and rifampicin, which are eluted locally, and they achieve MIC within 2 hours of implantation and maintain it for about 7 days. And the mesh gets completely absorbed in the body in about 8 to 10 weeks. And there is no change necessary, and there's no disturbance in the surgical technique during the replacement and revision procedures. And it doesn't leave anything, so there's no foreign body nidus for potential infection subsequently. And that's just a illustration how at the time of implantation the mesh looks, and then gradually it gets absorbed over a period of 9 weeks, leaving just the device and no evidence of any mesh. And this is the data showing how the antibiotic level can be maintained for about a week. So it delivers local antibiotic maintaining MIC for 1 week. Now we are aware that most of the organisms responsible for device infections are Staphylococcus and some other gram-negative rods. And it has been found that these 2 antibiotics, minocycline and rifampicin, they act against most of the common pathogens that are involved in the device infections, Staph aureus, Strep pneumoniae, E. coli, Mycobacterium catarrhalis, and MRSA also. So they are active against these implants. Now, what is the evidence? So this is there have been many smaller trials earlier, but the big trial for this antimicrobial envelope came in 2019, which is called RAPID study. It's a very big study of 7,000 patients, multi-center study. And it was a randomized trial where 3,500 patients in each arm were randomized to either receive the envelope or they were given routine therapy. And what they found was that there was a significant difference in the infection rates between the two groups, the envelope group and the non-envelope group. And the incidence of infection was brought down from about 1.2% to 0.7%. Now, as we can see, the device resulted in mainly the pocket infection and not in the bacteremia or endocarditis. So pocket infection was the main target as such for the envelope, and here it shines, and that as you can see in the bottom panel, the incidence of pocket infection was significantly reduced. Another important thing is that we can see that the low power devices, that is the pacemakers, did not have much difference, but the high power devices like the implantable defibrillators, they are the ones which showed the maximum improvement in the infection rate with the help of this. And the long-term results of RAPID study were published last year, and they also confirmed the same thing, that it brings down the infection rate. Overall, in all follow-up, it brought it down from 1.9% to 1.3%. So there was a 36% reduction, and there was no significant device or procedure-related complication as a result of the envelope. So the question comes, should it be used in everybody? Well, that is a question that can be left to the practice of the implanting physician. But what we can say is that it should definitely be considered in patients who have a high risk of device infection. So, for example, this chart shows that all CRTDs, they have high risk of infection, particularly those who where it's a replacement or revision or upgrade, or patient is on dialysis or immunosuppressive agents, or if there has been an infection in the past, they should definitely be considered for antimicrobial envelope. Similar is for ICDs, but de novo ICD implants are less risky as far as infection is concerned. And pacemakers and CRTPs, because of their smaller size, are also less susceptible to device infection, especially the initial procedure. But all patients who are on immunocompromised agents, immunosuppressive agents, or dialysis, or have had infection in the past should definitely be considered for the device. Now, this is my last slide, which basically shows it encapsulates all the factors that make a patient susceptible to device infection. And we can use these factors to decide whether our patient should be considered for, particularly considered for this antimicrobial envelope. And these factors could be modifiable, like the patient has fever before implantation, or skin disorders, or patients on heparin bridging. If the patient has a prolonged procedure, then we should consider it. If the patient has been on steroids, or has end-stage renal disease, or is on dialysis, or patients who have diabetes or malignancy, or severe heart failure, these are the patients who have higher incidence of infection, and they should be considered for device for this envelope. Similarly, patients, there may be device-related factors. So patients who have CRTD, or patients who have more than 2 leads, patients who have abundant or complex leads, multiple leads inside the body, and patients who are undergoing device upgrade or lead repositioning. Early opening of the pocket is a very important risk factor. If you have to re-enter the pocket early within 1 or 2 weeks, then that's a very important risk factor for infection, and these patients should be considered for antimicrobial envelope. So I think I will stop here. Thank you very much for listening. If there's any question, I'll be very happy to answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Saxena. Very relevantly, we are seeing for a lot of infection, but this device is particularly very helpful in like CRTD, like costly machines. of course, commonly for the single chamber and double chamber pacemaker, the cost versus benefit is AMA. But definitely for the high device and high risk patient is a very, very new technique and very effective for the those type of patient, because it is a nightmare for all the physicians who implanted this device, and after infection, very, very terrible nightmare like situation happens both for patient and doctors as well. Thank you very much for a very relevant topic dealing with.
Thank you so much.
So with all the related to all the five, Dr. Arora is here, Dr. Vanita Arora.
No, sir.
Dr. Shikdar, I think she is having some another engagement. Might be she is not. So
Okay, we can go for question answer if it is just one couple of minutes. We can have one question or two questions.
May I ask a question?
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Sanjay. Yes, Sanjay, we can hear you.
Dilip, go ahead. Yeah, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Dr. Shanmuga, like when we look at the anatomy of coronaries and the chances of coronary injury with the LB pacing or his bundle pacing, we feel that in his bundle pacing it should be more. One of the cases you demonstrated in left bundle pacing, ST elevation, and then the patient was finally rescued and patient was doing well. So what do you feel in which his bundle, left bundle chances of coronaries are coronary injuries are more?
So in his bundle pacing, this membranous septum will be pierced for only just 1 to 1.5 millimeter. So the lead will not that much deep. The lead, in fact, will not go that much deep into the septum. So only with the deep septal deployment of the lead, the chance of injury in the coronary is going to be high up, especially in septal branches. So that will happen with the left bundle branch pacing. So even if you are aiming for a distal is bundle pacing, the distal is bundle pacing is somewhat different from the routine is bundle pacing, where you go below the tricuspid leaflet, little below, and divert your lead towards probably 1 o'clock or 12 o'clock position to pierce it like obliquely towards that area. So that might probably injure the septum. So wherever you're going to go deep into the septum, the chance of injuring the coronary arteries are more.
But definitely these are more forgiving. Like if you injure the coronary arteries in a septum, maximum you are going to get a spasm or a hematoma,
Yes.
intrahematoma. Nowhere the patient is going to have a pericardial tamponade.
No,
when
no,
you are
nothing.
around, when you are around his, and if you inadvertently hits a coronary, then you can have a tamponade. That could be a little unforgiving situation.
Dr. Kalyan Sundaram, I have got one question. Can you hear
Yes,
me?
sir. Yes, sir.
Achha. Now the thing is that you said that in patients who are having LV systolic dysfunction with either LVP or high grade AV block, and then only you are considering this LVP pacing. But why not by default, all patients who are going for RV pacing, we should do LVP pacing or his bundle pacing rather than RV pacing? Because of in future they will develop LV dysfunction to prevent that.
Yeah, so in fact, that is what we are doing in our lab. So at least for the last 2 years, since we have started doing a physiological pacing, we have stopped putting leads in the right ventricle. So initially we started with his bundle, then gradually overlapped with left bundle. Now it is only of left bundle pacing. So whatever be the Brady indication, whether it is going to be an AV block or a symptomatic sick sinus syndrome requiring a dual chamber pacemaker, so we always put the lead in the left bundle area. And only if there is any concern in capturing the left bundle. So we had a failure of close to 6 patients out of that 200 cases. So only in those cases, the lead will go to the RV. That rarely happens with the left bundle. But
so
even
that means by default, it should be all LVP pacing by default. All
yes, sir, by default it will be pacing. It all depends on the comfort zone of the operators. If the operator is very much comfortable with his bundle, the ideal way to start with the his bundle, look for the pacing threshold. If the pacing threshold is less than 1.5, you can accept that his bundle and leave the lead there. If the pacing threshold is more than 1.5, you can come down to left bundle and complete the left bundle branch pacing. But in our lab, we are a little bit comfortable with left bundle, so we always start with the left bundle branch pacing straight away. And once the lead parameters are good, we'll accept that result.
Thank you. Sir, one question, Dr. Hajra sir, regarding that in your practice, how much you have a patient that dislodgement of the lead going in pulmonary setting?
Look, are you talking about LVP pacing? I have an experience only 30, not like Sumunga, who has got almost 200. We talk about micro. I have mentioned that there is no history of embolization, perforation, and death in my hand in India. There is only one death reported in 95 years old man due to perforation from one center in India, but so far there is no death. I agree that it is theoretically possible, but you have to know how to implant. You have to assure that the micra is nicely anchored, and the thread of micra is so strong. It is the highest tensile strength in the thread I have ever seen any implant. The problem is it is invisible. So you have to feel, and you have to see on fluoroscopy that your cup is moving towards the micra. Micra is fixed like any other device, ASD.
There is a question.
Thank you, sir.
I think Dr. Jha, you can read
Sunanda.
out the question. There is one question about non-ischemic DCM with RVV white QRS, whether any device implantation is recommended. In the chat box, there is one question.
Yeah.
Kanmuga, please, can you?
Yeah, sir. So non-ischemic DCM with RBPP, ideally, again, we have to start from Hisbundle pacing. So Hisbundle pacing, there is a high chance that it is going to correct it, because we know that the fibers are predestined in the Hisbundle. Suppose again, if the Hisbundle threshold is very high, you can probably go down to left bundle and capture the left bundle. Remember, left bundle pacing is going to produce right bundle branch block delay because you are pre-exciting the left ventricle. But though the left bundle pacing is going to produce it, there will be a synchronized contraction of the left ventricle because your left ventricular activation time is going to be rapid. So in our lab, again, we usually start looking for a good Hisbundle pacing capture threshold. If it's not working well, go down and capture the left bundle. So to correct that RBPP delay produced by this left bundle pacing, we can do some modifications. Like one is allowing the AV nodal conduction. So in patients with a native LBBP, probably you can allow the native AV nodal conduction to mask that RBP delay. So that is going to normalize the QRS. Or since the lead is deep inside the septum, the anode will also capture the septum. So once you program the bipolar configuration in such a way that both your cathode and anode is going to pace both the right and left side of the septum simultaneously, then you will have a normalization of the right bundle branch block. So in that way, probably with a single lead, you'll be able to completely correct a right bundle branch block pattern. So in a non-ischemic DCM, RBPP, where your CRT is a class 2A indication, still you can go ahead with doing a physiological pacing. That's going to produce a wonderful result.
Thank you. I think we can now close the session.